Thank you very much. So yes, my name's Kurt Adams. I'm the Vines Liaison Officer for Gloucestershire and Avon. And I'm going to talk to you about this hoard. This is the dog hoard from Gloucestershire. In my complete and utter biased opinion, it's probably one of the most important hoards that's been found in Gloucestershire. It's an absolutely beautiful thing. It was found metal detecting one weekend a few years ago. And the chap who found it is actually quite a level-headed person. I deal with lots of people, but this chap is certainly a level-headed person. He phoned me up first thing on the Monday. He found it on the Sunday. Phoned me up first thing on the Sunday and says, I found this hoard. It's enormous. It's fantastic. You've got to see it. I'm like, okay, fair enough. Okay, bring it in. And sure enough, within about a couple of hours, he's straight in our office, bringing this hoard. And he came into the office, and we've got this big, large, open-plan office in Gloucester. And he come in carrying these 2 plastic bags for this material. And he said, he came up to me and says, all right, I'm going to take out this hoard in exactly the same order that I found all these objects in. And so the first thing he showed me were these objects here. Lots of little scrap pieces of copper alloy. And as I'm looking at this copper alloy, I'm looking like, oh, actually, that's quite nice. This is lots of bands of copper alloy. It looks like it could be from a chest. It's all been stripped off the chest. And in fact, you can probably just see it just here. It's all been folded up. It's been processed. And there's this one here, this piece here, probably from a locker scutcheon. So that's quite interesting. Well, fair enough. And he says, I haven't finished yet. Okay, let's go for it. And then the next thing, so as I was digging down, I cleaned all that stuff up and I found all these objects. I'm like, whoa, now that is quite interesting, actually. And we've got all these here, these little bell-shaped mounts from some furniture. You've got these very ornate handles. And then these lovely handle fittings here and other mounts as well. And he says, and then I've got these other things. I'm like, well, right, okay. By this point, as I say, we're in an open-plan office and more people are starting to actually congregate around us. It brought out all these objects, and I'm thinking, like, oh, right, okay, now this is starting to be really significant because we've got the ever enigmatic dodecahedron, or fragment of. We've got the base of a statue set, so little votive or ritualistic statue set. We've got this face here and this other face here, which I'm going to come to in a bit more detail in a moment. And then he says, right, I've got this other stuff here, I'm going to bring it out. And he brought out all this lot. And I'm looking at it thinking, and by this point, the entire office is now crowded around this table. And I'm looking at it thinking, my God, these are parts of a statue. This is parts of a very large statue. This is absolutely fantastic. They've all been smashed up. And that's something that really caught my mind when I was looking through this. All of the material had been smashed up. There was nothing that was actually complete in this hoard. I'm like, and I turned around to him and said, like, no, this is a fantastic hoard. It's really important. He's like, I haven't finished yet. Really? And then he says, right, this is the most important object in the hoard. I'm like, okay, let's see. He plonked that on the table. And then by this point, as stuff's coming out, we're all going, oh. And then he put that on the table, and there was just dead silence. Apart from one individual who just went, Jesus Christ! And they just erupted. And what this is a large piece. It's about 30 centimetres long. It's quite a large hound that we're looking at here. And by this point, as I said, the entire office is surrounded with erupting into noise and quite a lot of excitement as we're looking at this, particularly at the hounds. And this is just a sample of what he actually brought in, laid out on the table. And you can see you've got some of the actual copper alloy fittings. There was about nearly 500 of these copper alloy bandings that were actually discovered on this site. And then some of the actual bell-shaped mounts, some of the statue just there, and some of the other parts here, and of course the dog taking centre stage. Now, as I said, as he's going down through this thing, bringing out these objects, these are actually in layers that he'd actually found them in this pit. Now, it was an unfortunate story that he found it on the Sunday. He did contact me. He tried to contact myself. He also contacted the tenant farmer, but the tenant farmer was a bit wary of archaeologists, and she just told him, like, right, just get out of the ground. I don't want archaeologists involved. Just get out of the ground. And so, to full credit to him, he did try as much as he possibly could in quite a difficult situation to actually record how he found all this material. And so here he is trying to illustrate about how all these things come up the ground. But what really struck me is, as he was getting to the bottom, all the material, particularly the votive material and the statuary, was in this big, tight bundle just there. So it's basically deposited in the ground in a sack. Now, when we think about this sort of material, and especially dogs in Gloucestershire, there's one site we immediately go to, and that's the Temple at Lydney. At the Temple at Lydney, it's a fantastic site, beautiful overlooking the River Severn. You've got the Iron Age fort there with the actual temple in one side of it. As I say, it's a beautiful location. But in the actual site at Lydney, there was a number of images of dogs that were found. So you've got the Gloucester dog at the background, and you've got a representation that we have in Bristol Museum of one of the dogs, the most beautiful dog that was actually found on the Lydney site. It's a nice sort of greyhound-looking animal. There was a number of other representations of dogs actually on the site. So what is the significance of the dogs on that site? Well, it could be that the Lydney Temple was actually thought to be dedicated to Nodens, a healing god. And certainly in the classical world, dogs could be seen, had been seen as having healing properties. One way we see that is in licking, actual licking dogs. And these two examples from Conway. When we look at these licking dogs, you can see that they've got a very distinctive posture. If you look at these dogs here, they've got a nice rounded back, both of them. They're sitting there, sort of hunched over somewhat. The actual tail, especially on both animals, are actually tucked underneath the legs. And they're looking very submissive. And indeed, the ears are tiny, very, very small ears. And in fact, these ears are placed against the side of the head. Again, they've got a very submissive look about them. And then if we look at the actual tongues themselves, understandably, they're licking dogs. The tongues are actually protruding forward and lulling down. And the dogs seem to be looking directly ahead of them. Now, as I say, when we think about Roman dogs in Gloucestershire, the first thing we think about is Lydney, and you start wondering about licking dogs. However, if we then compare these dogs to our dog, the Gloucester dog, I wouldn't say that's looking very submissive at all. In fact, I would say that dog is looking incredibly alert. If you just look at the actual posture of it, standing there, nice and alert, its tail, rather than being tucked between the legs, is there at the back, quite upright. So it's in a very alert posture. And if we actually look at the ears, they're not small ears. They're not lolling down on the side of the head, against the side of the head. They're upright, they're alert, they're listening. And then again, if we look at the actual mouth, beautifully detailed teeth, we actually see there. Again, not something you'd expect with a submissive animal. The tongue, it's not lolling down, it's not licking, it's actually sticking forward, it's panting. And then finally, if you look at the eyes, they're not looking forward at the subject that they would be licking. Instead, they're looking up at their master. So I would argue that is not a licking dog. That is more like an alert dog, possibly a hunting dog. Now, if you look just here, there's two holes in the actual side of the shoulder of the dog. We was lucky that when the actual hoard came out, we was able to get Martin Hennig and Penny Coombe to actually do a lot more research into this assemblage. And something that Martin Hennig picked up straight away was actually those two holes. They actually signify that there was another statue attached to this dog. So it was actually, this dog is not a singular statue, it's actually part of a set. So we've got this dog, this alert dog, this hunting dog. Who could that be associated with? Diana. We see, and also a Greek counterpart. We see Diana quite often. Normally Diana is represented with a stag, but about 30% of the imagery we do see is with a dog, just here. And in fact, if you look at this dog here, it's a nice alert dog, and also it's looking straight up, as is that one, straight up to its master, just like our Gloucester dog. We also have similar examples in the area. This is from Neston Shrub. We have a female bust here, again, thought to be Diana. And we have, next to her, is this lovely dog. Again, nice big ears, looking straight up to its master. Again, exactly the same way as our example. So what about some of the other items in the hoard? Well, we have a lot of this drapery material, and again, it looks like drapery from a female statue. And in fact, we do have lots of some of this banding as well. Again, similar banding to what we see in female statues. Female statues like the statues of Diana. And in fact, as we were looking at, and as Martin was looking at it, he found that there's about 20 pieces of statuary in the assemblage. But most of it would come from a single statue, but not all of it. There was about another 2 statues actually within this assemblage. And these statues were actually life-size bronze statues. So they would have been a significant statue. But again, all of it has been smashed up. All of it is smashed up apart from the dog. The dog, at the very bottom of the assemblage, at the very bottom of the pit, was the only thing that was complete. Moving on, we've got this plaque that was found in there. We had John Price from King's College London who actually examined it. And he reckoned it was an honorific inscription from a corporate body, possibly people, citizens of Gloucestershire or citizens of Gloucester, that would pay for an honorific statue, possibly for a patron, but not exclusively. You do see these in the classical world where they're actually paying for a statue of a deity. So could this plaque be associated with a statue of possibly Diana from this assemblage? And again, John was very excited about this because they are very rare occurrences. Now going back to these folded up pieces of copper eye, as I said, there was nearly 500 of these pieces, and all of them were folded up. They were all processed in some sort of way. And it certainly looks like they were ripped off from a chest, folded up, and placed in this assemblage, so folded up to actually reduce the size. Now, what we did notice is that with these escutcheon plates, there's very, very few of them. There's only about 4 of these escutcheon plates. And this led us to wonder, could these boxes that all these banding has come from, could they actually be from a large chest, or just a couple of large chests? Not something that we would expect to see from a domestic setting, but possibly more from a ritualistic setting, maybe a temple or something along the lines. Now again, we can continue that religious theme. We've got these very ornate handles here, and also these handle mounts here. Now we've had very similar mounts to these that were found actually in the Temple of Lydney as well. We've got the actual statue base, but also these 2 faces here. Could that be the face of Diana that's associated with our dog? And then just on this side here, we've got, you can just about see some horns just there. That is actually a steer, so a spirit of the wood. Again, we'll continue with this sort of idea that we have sort of a hunting theme within the assemblage, or a theme revolving around Diana. And then we really come to the dating of the hoard. That was it wasn't so easy because there was very little dated evidence. We had a buckle, we had a coin, we had a spoon, we also had a bracelet and so on. But it was generally thought the actual hoard dated to about the 4th century, the middle of the 4th century, middle to late 4th century AD. So heading towards the end of the empire. And that really then leads to the interpretation of the hoard. What we are looking at is basically a founder's hoard. It's a metalwork hoard that's been collected, ready to be melted down, because all of this material has been processed. It's been the iron strips have been folded up, the statue's been smashed up, everything has been smashed up apart from the dog. So it's been processed, ready to be melted down. In fact, we did some field walking over the site of the actual hoard itself, and we found a lot of bloomery slag over the actual area. We also did some geophysics, and there were some buildings in the area. So we do wonder if there was actually a forge actually on the site. There was also lots of copper alloy slag in the assemblage as well. So we have a founder's hoard. Now, the problem with a founder's hoard, there could be metalwork collected from a number of areas, so you can never be totally sure. But it does seem that most of what, if not all of the material, could have come from one site. So could we be looking at a temple of Diana at the end of the Roman Empire when Christianity is coming in, it's stamping its dominance on the landscape? Could this be a temple that's been a pagan temple that's been stripped down of all its metalwork that's then going to be processed on this site, ready to be melted down. But fortunately, for some reason, they never got round to doing this material, and so now luckily we actually have all this material in the modern environment. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Kurt. Okay, has anyone got any questions both about the Willersey sword hoard and the Gloucester dog? Carolina.
Hi, Kurt. Thank you so much. Sorry, I want to take my mask off. Thank you so much. That's really interesting. And I'm speaking just after you about Disney, so
Brilliant.
So not a surprise. My question will be a surprise, but there's a lot of synergy, as you say, between the objects that you've got. Even actually the bits of caskets that you were saying folded up in exactly the same way. So there's a lot of synergy. Bit of the dodecahedron as well. So my question is, how close is this find spot from the temple, and have you thought about things having come from Lindy as well?
Yeah, absolutely. No, we don't think it has. It's come from the other side of the river, and it's actually just below Gloucester. So we were wondering, could this be a temple in Gloucester? Because we haven't got one that we know of. Could this be a temple in Gloucester that was actually been processed and then brought down just below the actual city limits? So, yeah. So we don't think it's associated with Lindy, but there certainly seems to be a connection in some way. But just the sort of notion of the actual Diana and healing.
Thank you. Can you repeat the question just for the video?
Oh yes, yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Is it possible that actually it's been deliberately decommissioned rather than being broken up to be processed?
Decommissioned as so the question is, can we be certain it has been deliberately decommissioned? It's certainly the way it's all been smashed up and the way it's all been cut up and processed in the sense that it's been in layers. There's no doubt about it, and also the fact that we think we've got a forge site on that site. There's no doubt about it that it has been. It was ready to be melted down. We're certain about that. Could it have been decommissioned in the Roman sense? Possibly. Don't know. We just don't know.
I just thought that the fact that a bit of the dodecahedron was found with the assemblage, and if the assemblage is looking like it's coming from a sort of temple site or something like that, well, it might be useful for people researching into the dodecahedron to actually have almost like a contact sort of thing. Well, it might come from. I might have a temple piece. That's
Yeah.
I'm not sure how you smash up a large life-size statue. was it cut or had it been beaten? How were those fragments made?
That's a good question, and one I don't know the actual answer to without actually looking at the material. No, I couldn't say that. I couldn't say without actually looking at off the top of my head with any certainty. Actually, going back to that, I don't. Thinking about it, and I haven't seen the actual statue material for a little while. I don't think any of it was cut. Okay. In fact, I'm pretty sure none of it was cut. If I remember, again, going back to the mists of time in my mind, I don't remember seeing any cuts on any of the edges. They were quite jagged, rough edges on all of the pieces. So, yeah, I don't think any of it was cut, to be honest.
Rachel.
Going to the swords for a moment, I suppose the obvious question to ask when Rachel was discussing the options of the other scoured braces and things being spread across the field is, has the past database been checked for other finds with the same find spots? Is there anything that's come out from that?
Yeah, so the question is there any other PAS database, PAS information on the database for the Willersey sword and its surrounding area? No, is the simple answer. We did do, as soon as the actual swords come up, we did do a HER search, and we did have evidence for from a field walking survey 20 years prior to that of pottery that had been found not actually on that site, but much further towards the river. But when it actually came to metal detecting evidence, there was very, very little evidence whatsoever. In fact, I was speaking to the actual, to Glenn, the actual finder, and also to the rally organiser. And they were saying that they've had that people have gone in that field before and they found absolutely nothing. And in fact, Glenn was the only person that actually found anything that day. So it seemed that conditions of that field is not very conducive to metal detecting, and also the swords were just a little bit too shallow too deep, for many of the machines. So from a metalwork point of view, there's been very little that's been recorded from that field just in general that we know of.
Great. One more.
Just going back to the question of smashing of statues, is that stuff, is it a solid bronze statue, or are they the bronze components that have been on a sort of wooden, because you also get statues that are made up of basically bronze over a wooden floor?
Yeah, the actual pieces were, they ranged, obviously, but they were about just under a centimetre thick. So, they could have been over an object.
Lovely, okay, thank you. Thanks very much, Kurt. Thank you.